Hi, this is Lynn, and welcome to another Persuasion Byte, bite-sized tips on persuasion that you can use right away. This time we're talking about negotiation and the unconscious biases that can affect the decisions that you make, either as a person who's negotiating or a person who's being negotiated with. Because here's the truth. When I talk about unconscious bias, people automatically think, oh, bias, like racism or terrible people. And that's not me. I'd never do that. Here's the truth. The reason that all of us have unconscious biases is because our brains are lazy. And they were never designed to do the things that we're going to do with them now. Our brain's primary job was to keep us alive and to scan the horizon and look for physical and verbal risks and threats and get us out of the way. And the other thing that goes on in our brain is that it's always monitoring our energy level, and it wants us to put energy in the place that's going to best serve us for survival. Which means that our brains would rather use shortcuts to make decisions than expend a lot of energy sorting through everything and coming up with the quote-unquote right decision. So our brain has created these shortcuts which then turn into unconscious bias. And when you are negotiating, here are the ones that you will either have in your own brain or you will face in the brains of the people you're negotiating with. The first is called affinity bias, which means that we are more comfortable with people who look and act and sound like us. This dates back to when we were all in tribes, and you wanted to look like everybody else in the tribe so you wouldn't get thrown out, and you were suspicious of other people who didn't look like the people in your tribe. And when we're negotiating, we're more likely to feel automatically more comfortable with people who look like us than don't, which means that you need to expend the extra energy to create an affinity with people who don't look and act and sound like you to overcome this unconscious bias. The second kind of bias we face is confirmation bias, which is that once we hold an opinion, we look around for other ideas that support our opinion, and we automatically discount ideas that agree with ours. And frankly, with the internet and social media and all of the stuff that we search for online, we have a tendency to create our own echo chamber. What I'm asking you to do to deal with the unconscious bias of confirmation bias is to ask yourself, okay, does this idea that does not agree with mine actually have merit? Once again, expend a little more energy there. The next type of bias we can face is attribution bias. When we see somebody else who has succeeded, we think, well, it must be because they got some unfair advantages or some unlucky or some breaks that were lucky. As opposed to me, how come I never got those lucky breaks? I had to work really hard to earn things. We automatically assume that people who have gotten ahead had some unfair advantage. When you're negotiating, ask yourself those questions. Double check to make sure whether the person has really earned the things that he, she, or they is talking about. Don't automatically assume they got something that you should have had, that you had to work really hard for. Then we have anchor bias. This is where the first idea we hear on a subject is the one that we use as the benchmark for everything else we hear on a subject. If we're talking about negotiation and we hear a price, well, that becomes the benchmark that we use and compare all of the other prices to that. Easiest thing to do is to think about the price of gasoline. Hey, a couple years back, it was $2, and now it's much more than that. Well, we're paying too much for gas. Know that you have this anchor bias in there. The first idea you encounter is the one that you judge everything else against, and sometimes it's no longer a fair comparison. Then we have the halo effect. And this is where when we like a person, we automatically believe good things about that person, whether or not we've ever seen that. We give them positive attributes, even though we haven't experienced that. What that means is that when we're thinking about people that we're negotiating with, make sure that we have facts behind the things that we attribute to them. And we're not just making it up and filling in the gaps. And the same thing is true for the opposite, which is the horns effect. And this is where, when we don't like somebody, we automatically believe that there are all kinds of negative qualities that they have, that we've never seen them exhibit, but they must have them because we don't like them. Delve into the questions to ask yourself whether or not these things are actually true, or what the heck, on all of these biases, if we're just making these up because our brain doesn't want to take the time to dig more deeply. So in negotiations, here's my ask of you. Do dig more deeply. When people don't look or sound or act like you, know that it's not a threat. When we think positive things about one candidate, if we're talking about a job, or negative things about another, find things out. Don't just guess. Make your unconscious biases conscious and double check. Because when you do this, you will make much more sound decisions, and you will open yourself up to possibilities that you wouldn't have if you just stuck with those biases. You'll make your world a bigger place, and you'll fill it with better people. Thanks for watching.